Well, I thought I might talk about stepping aside and looking at my experience. So I work at INRAE. I'm a research director. I'm a PhD in mechanics, solid mechanics, and I've been involved in analyzing things. And this is my standpoint. And I thought I may explain where I start from, and then I will step back and think about interdisciplinary. And what I'm interested on is biomechanics and mechanobiology of plant in their fluctuating environment. And I've been studying a lot wind mechanosensing and the resulting growth acclimation. So here you have, for example, the way we measure the effect of wind on the tree. Here you have a visualization of how much matters for plants for moving in the wind. So here is in the prop, alfalfa, you restrict motion in one piece and you can see the difference. So it makes a difference. It's the same with trees. You stop one tree from moving, so it doesn't sense, and you can just decrease a lot the amount of wood production. So when they move, you can double the wood production. This is the amount. And we've been developing tools to phenotype this without throughput. There is a patent on that. And I'm also interested in what happens when plants do have problem with wind. For example, they get tilted or lodged, and how do they recover so that aqueduct can become resilient? So we've been interested on this as posture control. It involves tropism. We've studied that, where we show that it involves something else, and this is the sensing by the plant of its own shape, which is called proprioception. And we model that. It's been very influential to have models. This is the model of posture control. It works with this Arabidopsis system, for example. And altogether, because it is very short, one slide for all my work, it took 30 years, right? Is almost not all, but part of it is we've been modeling how this is very important to the way the selection of being able to make trees out of the evolution, and this has been modeled. So my take-home message is there are 2 points here. First, we were 3 of us dealing with mechanobiology, so I thought you will have 2 talks at all, Dolph, Olivier Allemand next week, and myself. So I thought that we could be a bit bored with mechanobiology, but all of us, we decided to speak of something else, right? So if you're interested in that, please join and we can talk at the... So as you notice, this is a lot of interdisciplinary between physics, both solid and fluid mechanics. There are different subdisciplines that have problems talking together, plant science, physiology, and down to functional genomics and applied math. And I've been involved also in a task group to think about promoting transdisciplinary research for INRAE and CIRAD. And we met also with social scientists for that. And I thought it might be interesting to share about this topic and what I learned, or could learn from all this experience. I'm not going to give you success stories. There are a few in the rooms, several in the rooms. You will show one, Christophe, and even failure stories would be interesting, but I have tried to get some general views on that. So here we are. So the general idea, you get it, it's that you just change the perspective and you get new knowledge, you cross disciplines. There are lots of drawing in the internet showing how good it is for example, getting more engaged, getting reducing, this is important, reducing the cognitive bias. You know, the cognitive bias, one is fixation. All the community is focused on one type of problem and one type of solving, and usually interdisciplinary things brings things out. Well, there's a lot of interest. So it has been efficient. It sounds promising when you start, but my question is, what are the risks and what are the forces at work? What we learn from what we've been done. So to do that, you need to start with what is actually discipline. This is not something that you ask yourself a lot of time. So you take a dictionary and you said it's an organized body of knowledge and methods. Good. But in fact, it has a lot of other meanings and other aspects. For example, a discipline that Michel Foucault, a philosopher, French philosopher, did a lot of work, is a rule of conduct and interpersonal skill. So self-discipline is I'm going to behave correctly in this group. Okay. It also means punishment rules for deviation, right? So disciplinary sanction. You might say, well, but this is not irrelevant. But when you accept or refuse funding or a publication because you say this is not really the scope of our discipline, well, in fact, you're doing that. It's not just giving punishment, but it is a kind. A very important thing is that a discipline is a professional community, as we all know. So we have shared history, official history, role model, even founding myth. And this is also important, it's a way the discipline is a defense of interest. So who is going to access chairs? And I'm sure we all have experienced sometimes this thing that say, oh, but those guys from the other discipline, they get twice as much position that we do. If this is a problem, let's do something. This is the example of what it is. And the last characteristic of discipline is what is passed on to disciple. Which disciple mean in Latin means the student, right? And so it is the reproduction of your own community that is at stake. And this is exactly what professorship is about, being able to stand and speak for the students to do the same. Well, as you know, a scientific discipline, they take shape in the 19th century, they increase, differentiate into a discipline or field and subfield or specialty, like some examples here. There have been obvious jargons, different ways of thinking, and people get concerned about the towers of Babel of science or sciences. And some of them, they started saying that should be the era of the interdisciplinary now. So very general, broad speaking things. But come on. If I would like to look in a bit more detail, but before I make sure we understand our vocabulary. So what is multiplicity, inter, and transdisciplinarity? There are different definitions. I give some more standard one, but they are different. And so we understand each other. So multidisciplinarity is the presence in the same institution, for example, university, of different disciplines. They have their building, they interact, but no direct scientific interaction. Pluridisciplinarity, there is joint achievement by bringing the discipline together, but they don't have to modify their vision. Each one is delivering what it knows how to do. So we can represent this like this, right? Each one is field and just an interface to give things. This works well with project mode. And it's also the case, not only in collaboration between scientists, but when you work with engineers or technicians, you have to handle this type of problems. Interdisciplinarity is when there is an interaction which favors a more systemic response, understanding. And this involves, at some point, a transformation of some of the way one discipline is handling the problem. And the people inside will all tackle the same problem, not each one gets its own deliverable and give to the other. So this is what I'm gonna, well, you can maybe draw at least like this. It's kind of simple model. And transdisciplinarity is something beyond disciplines, more recently even beyond sciences. Maybe something like this, I don't know. Anyhow, I'm gonna talk about only this one. So this is focus on my talk. So now we agree with this. I would like to make something more detailed, maybe, than what I explained before, like we need interdisciplinarity in general. There is historical aspect on that, and it has changed over time, what the meaning of interdisciplinarity. For a long time, and it's a mode, it was a transition to new discipline. For example, biochemistry, biology and chemistry, late to a new discipline. This is still going on, for example, in some way, you may argue differently, but bioinformatics is probably doing the same. So that's one thing. Then in the 50s came the cybernetics and system theory that kind of tried to have a general framework for all science. It has its pros and cons, but it didn't work out completely. And over the 90s or 80s, let's say, then people try to use interdisciplinarity at the frontier of science, but without making new disciplines. So I have two examples here. Pierre-Gilles de Gennes is a French Nobel Prize, or Cristina Marchetti in Santa Barbara, I think. So there are examples. And there have been, so the meaning is here, there's an endogenous encouragement to interdisciplinarity to tackle the problem. And there have been a lot all over the world, many institutes that are designed to that, which is I belong to one of them. But the important point here is that it's not the only way interdisciplinarity gets into the new way to get in the topic, because there have been also, oh, sorry, I'm not in the wrong. There's been another way, and this is related to the work by sociologists, and one of the famous science sociologists is Helga Lovny, who has been president of ERC for some time, and she's been very influential. She wrote a book which is called Rethinking Science, and she differentiates mode one way of behaving in science, which is disciplinary, broadly speaking, and mode two, which is interdisciplinary and attacking real-world problems, right? And it has been very influential for ERC, but also for Europe and all over the world. And it has been felt by many scientists like an exogenous injunction to interdisciplinarity. So you should do that. And even in some places, there have been attempts to change the organization of research for bringing more interdisciplinarity all through the courses. And what occurs then is that the disciplines themselves, because they're so important, they kind of reacted to that. And I've been studied by this guy, several people actually, sociologists, show that there have been a reaction against this injunction to too much interdisciplinarity. So here we are. It's a more precise view, I guess. And now that I've given the context, I would like to try to understand how those interdisciplinarity work really. So to do that, we need to understand in particular what those two scientific disciplines have in common and what they don't have. So I'm interested in attractive and repulsive forces. I'm a physicist by training. Forces between disciplines. And then I will try to get a hint on the dynamics of an interdisciplinary project with a toy model, so a simple model. Let's do that. So attractive and repulsive forces which act on the actors, for example, and on you when you start an interdisciplinary. Sociologists have been studying that, people from studying sociology and science. And those two, for example, Rupert Merton and Harriet Zuckerman, they've been thinking a lot on this, and they raised the importance of social norms. So the social norms in science. What is this about? So social norm, maybe, I don't know if you know that, it's an implicit, unspoken rule that makes us think, act in reference to a group. It acts on two things. So behavior, so those called behavior norms. So for example, this lady, she's doing her PhD defense, but at the same time, she's also a very good hip hop crump dancer. I like crump also, I don't know if you like that. But she's not going to confuse one behavior into the other. She knows in which group she can do one thing. And she will never do his hip hop PhD. The second type of social norms is judgment norms, which is what means both judgment, but also belief and opinion. And this is very involved. For example, it's how we convince someone. So how do we convince someone else about our theory, for example? So I'm going to detail two of them. So let's start by judgment norms. In disciplines, many things can be seen as judgment norms that are not only that, but there are that. For example, ontology, which is basically what are the relevant entities and the correct mode of assembly for a discipline. So it varies from one discipline to the other. And also together, usually a set of observation and fact that really are relevant to understand these entities and usually used in classes as pedagogical example. For example, we heard about the central dogma and some other talk, and it's been taught all over to explain that this is the way it works and all this stuff. So this is ontology. This is defining what you think is relevant and correct. Another step is methodology. For example, what type of problem statement, a set of questions that arise and must be solved. And this defines where are the frontiers of our disciplines. There are also all the guidelines for methodology, how these questions should be asked, studied, interpreted. And very important, in the negative, what are the anomalies that we don't want to see too much? So we sweep them into the rug or minimize them. And usually we do not teach them. So this has been studied by several epistemologists. One, Ludwig Fleck was the first pioneer, and then Thomas Kuhn is much more known. And they call him paradigm. I'm sure you heard about this, which definition is kind of the set of beliefs, values, and techniques that are shared by members of a group, a discipline, during a period of theoretical consensus. And he called that normal science, which means it follows the norm. So at that time, well, all the scientists, where they go to the science frontiers all together and to deal with always in the same way. And some days, what that was Thomas Kuhn was explaining, there were maybe too many anomalies, and then the crisis come, there's a conflict of the paradigms. Eventually, there are several that came out. And if one wins, he called that a scientific revolution. Myriam Salomon, which came after, she has really warned us about like, it's kind of big, too big, and sometimes it's post-hoc reconstruction, and sometimes the scientific revolution took more time. But anyhow, it's useful to think interdisciplinarity, to think this way. The last thing about methodology, and this is very crucial to my experience, is the mode of administrating evidence, or the way you can falsificate a theory. So as you know, from Karl Popper, it's the heart of scientific. So it's a way you can resolve the divergence between people. And when you look at discipline, the one I have experienced, we have very different ways. Mathematical demonstration, formal logic demonstration, which is different because it's not quantitative. Comparison between model prediction, experimental measurements, experimental demonstration, informal logic. This does that, then this does that. It influence, expressed, and then. And in perpendicular to that, the way we take into account randomness or oscillation, and the way we handle this. This is very important, and this varies a lot. So the way that which evidence is administrated diverge among disciplines, and even this is only natural life science. I'm not going forward. And of course, when you meet together, you have to agree on the administration of evidence. If not, you have no chance to do science. The last judgment norms, we usually don't, is typically not something we're not conscious, is aesthetics. What is ugly and what is elegant, which is typically something that you never stated, you learn by. I had a PhD student who came from theoretical physics. He did a theory for proprioception. Herman knows him, Renaud Bastien. And he also did experiment. And then I said, well, you have to do statistics. He looked at statistics from a mathematical point of view, find them ugly. He said that it's just a tinkering of, it's not pure, nice math, and refused to do it ever. So I did the statistic myself, right? This has been studied a lot. There's currently an interest on that. If you're interested, I'm not going to detail more, but for example, in Cambridge, Milena Ivanovna, she's studying for that, and it's very interesting to read. Well, just make this, with this framework, we're gonna apply it to two disciplines that I know, so functional genomics, you all know it, ecophysiology. An example was by Christophe Morel using the two, right? And we try to do this. For ontology, well, in crop physiology or in ecophysiology, where you have tissue organs. This is the level. If you illustrate the structure, you show like how it was structured. You care about mass, energy, and information fluxes quantitatively. You have action laws that way quantitatively change the response, biological response, and you care about conservation laws and budget. In front, and all the rest, you call it, you put in a black box, and you call it genotype. On the reverse, on the other side, well, I'm not going to teach you that, but we matter with molecules, cells, and tissue. I should have put molecules, of course. Molecular actors, here there are. The name actor is very meaningful. You have to think about it. And genes, we heard about gene models. And for example, there's the sentence that the gene is expressed. It means a lot of things about the way we've seen. And of course, transition pathways and networks. And the rest is phenotype. And in fact, you can see that when you meet, this is very often when disciplines are basically the same object, so subdiscipline, like for example, both are plant sciences, well, actually you black box the other discipline, which could be very interesting because it could be also a present box. When you start to work together, you get into the black box, something that you will not have. And I think your talk was really exemplary on that. Well, for methodology, well, for ecophysiology, this modeling is usually not very parsimonious. It's sometimes a bit ugly to me, but they do that. And falsification is through quantitative measurement and comparison model. And of course, on the other side, there's a lot of logical reasoning with codification and schemes. Well, the basic scheme is this one for gene. I didn't put protein so far. And but you understand that. And one proof is, for example, mutant phenotype and functional validation that we've heard of. So you can see how much difference it is between the two. Now, let's speak a bit about behavioral norms. So the obvious one is the jargon. It is important because it's not only useful because it's accurate, but it also gives you a kind of guild mentality. So we understand each other easily, the other we don't understand them. But there are other aspects which are important in behavior, and there are all the object and setups and their operating mode, which are important. And it's meaningful when you try to explain to kids what are the science, you draw objects, you see, basically. And there have been studies on that by two sociologists, by Leonard Crick and Bruno Latour. They've been working a lot on the way this shapes the understanding of what is science. And there are many other related behaviors and stereotypes, which I'm not going to detail, like whether the lab is tidy or not, the cleanness, the way you dress, the genders that are there. There are many things. So let's apply this to ecophysiology. And well, for example, this for MAMLab was obvious, is for the ecophysiologist and physicist, what the lab is ideally a creative mess. When you get there, you try to find the things, and that's the best. And obviously, for the other wet lab, it should be clean and ordered, ideally. Sometimes it's not, but. And obviously, when one goes to the other, well, and then at least in our institute, because one was male-dominated, female-dominated, I don't comment on that. Right. So what is the paper? What are the paper? Is the paper central function of this? Well, there are two of them. One is, as I explained before, is implicitly tell us what to do and not to do with respect to the community I refer. You remember the example of the people defending the young girl, the lady defending her PhD. And the second one, which is very important, it defines the social identity of individual in a group. And so it preserves the specificity of the social group. So it builds the identity. So it means that spontaneously, you will attracted to the people that share this, and you will be indifferent or repulsed toward the other groups. Not everyone, I can see, for example, there are these people, but I'm talking about these people which don't share that afterwards. The mode of operation and acquisition of social norm is this, the following, and this is very important, is social learning. It means that you never state them, but you learn it out of practice. So it's a socialization, a social comparison process during the academic courses. So we implicitly internalize the values and ways of behaving of the disciplines. And the function of that, it's actually been studied. It reduces the tension within the group, and you don't need to exert a lot of coercion. And now, implicitly, because it's implicit, it is problematic when we are dealing with two groups with different norms. So when there are two disciplines, there might be tension at the interface. So another statement is to remain at the interface between the two disciplines requires permanent work. Here I see you now agree, it was that for the. So be careful about the unwitting effect of I've been doing this interdisciplinarity, but it's so easy to me because it's not the case. So usually when people state that, it's usually they're talking about pluridisciplinarity, which is good per se, but if you need interdisciplinarity, it doesn't work. Now, to finish, let's look about the dynamics. Can we get something about the dynamics of interdisciplinarity in the project and the lab from what I explained to you before? So I have a toy model, and this is the emulsion of immiscible liquids, like oil and water or vinegar. So as you know, for the may know, this is the immiscibles, there's an energy or work to increase the interface between the area and the radius, the ratio between the energy and the change in area is the tension at the surface. So when you have to try to make an emulsion, which would be like making two disciplines build something together, usually what we do, so it's called incentive policy. We try to mix people together. We set them in a room, please talk, get a coffee break together. So that's the vinaigrette wizard. You turn, you shake, you break up phases, they discuss all together. And as soon as you stop,
they separate.
So it relaxes. And this is just normal. It's unstable because it requires work. And so this works fine with pluridisciplinarity. You just need interaction for a while. If this proper time constant, it will work. For interdisciplinarity, usually it's too fast, so it doesn't work. So what you need? More? Who knows? Surfactant, amplifier, which means exactly something that likes both, that understand both, that share the norms of both, the interest of the different elements, the rule of making demonstration. And in my model, it's coming from the egg, right? And now you're trying to make vinegar, mayo. Okay, so let's carry on a little bit because it's a bit fun, of course, but it's before lunch, so you can appreciate, but it's also interesting, I guess. So it depends on the concentration of amplifier, right? So there is a concentration called critical missile concentration where you start, instead of stabilizing a large interface, you start to having a lot of micelles or small groups, things. And if you go too far away with many amplifiers, then you have a saturation and a precipitate, and you have a third phase. With I'm almost finished with my small model. You may say that's fun. It's funny with with the mayo. I see the point, but there's no production except the mayo. Nothing has been produced. We produce knowledge, so you can make it more complex. Like there have been studies like when something is only occurring, like nucleation and polymerization or something is only occurring during the micelle, and you can draw things about this. You can even think about more. There's in this example, the dynamics of drop dissolution, how long it takes micelle together and then dissolve is very important. You can make more complex model like with active transport or whatever it is. I stop here. What can we learn with this simple toy model? What are the control parameters? Well, a very important thing is the amphiphilic strength. So it means how much you understand and like the two disciplines. So how do you train that? Given the social disciplinary norm, how with the shared different relevant question, the mode of administrating evidence or falsification, what is elegant or not, the aesthetics. So what you find out in the success story is that they have created a local agreement on that. And during all the ID project, I will make an example at the end. The second control parameters, and everyone has done Mayo knows that, is the amount of each phase. If you put too much oil, the Mayo falls out. And this is just not, the analogy is very important, I think, because the balance between discipline, from the what all of us study, is very important. If you put too much of one or too much of the other, then you destabilize the thing. Of course, I explained the amplified concentration of how many people there around love the both disciplines is important. And you have to find the proper concentration range, because if not, you get a new subdiscipline. And that's what is occurring. And the drop dead side is very important in the Mayo. I don't know if you know that. So when you decrease the size, you increase interface surface. You can also get a better elastocapillary resistance of each drop, so stronger drops. And you have emergence of a microscopic trait, will be like interdisciplinary, and that's the Mayo setup. So the team size is important. And also the way you steer. And the last point is, but this is not just a joke, is to make good Mayo, you need good ingredients, which means like a non-rancid oil or beautiful egg or whatever, which means you have to pay attention to preservation of discipline. You remember what I told you about, what the political incentive of this, and you have to pay attention to the people who work, especially the amplified, so they keep all their freshness. Don't bear with it. When I first explained this, give the talk, people say, "Oh, it's great. We could do more with this selling of the Mayo analogy, the toy model." And for example, the selling of the Mayo or the ID Mayo, we can talk about comparing with publication grants or professorship tenure. So this is how to raise the funding or how to get to sell the ideas. But here it's fun, but the model is not giving us any insight. So there are real problems with ID. That's the reason why I wrote. But my Mayo model is not able to do this. Obvious, the limits of the Mayo model, there are many. There are more than one dimension in the interfacial tension between two disciplines. So the nature and strengths of possible resistance could be detailed. That was sociologists do that. I listed a series of norms and instincts that increase resistance. There are even cases where there are opposition in two disciplines competing for the same object. The example is economy and sociology. Basically, they deal with the same stuff, but they don't agree the ways to deal with it. And so they're continuously do that. And to decrease the resistance, you can think about the situation that promote the emergence of ID, whether it's on site, during department, in project, and or the ID germs that are available, where are there amplified around? How did you do that, whether individual or teams? And of course, my model doesn't take into account the human dimension. So how we do that and manage that is an important aspect, which my model doesn't address. One point which is interesting goes back to Zuckerman and Merton, the sociology, is that there are also social norms that are common to all the science, and they're usually very useful when you build up on interdisciplinarity. And so you can propose methods to do that. I'm not finished. I'm just going to give an example of the recipe of mayonnaise we used. I'm not going to detail it because it's a secret, but just explain it. So in our unit, protein research unit, we have all these disciplines, right, together. And also we have technical skill, which add all other disciplines. And the way we did is to define a clear map of at different level of what we intend to do and who is doing what and what is expected to add to the understanding of the others. And then you can, I'm not going to detail that. That's one recipe for us, not for everyone. And then you can set the different disciplines there involved. And in green is inside the research institute, if you want, our research unit, and the yellow one are outside. So this is kind of local, both epistemic and pragmatic map. Who is going to do what and why, and with what concept. So to finish, my conclusion is interdisciplinarity is very engaging. There is clear record of success, but there are also a lot of failures. And I hope that I convince you that it could be insightful in case it requires for that we agree on the map of the territory to explore and the difference in way of thinking, and are aware of all these effects of norms and have a strategy to manage them. And my experience, and on the group we did all this recording of the different experience, is that naivety on that doesn't often pay off. So, but that's it. And discussion.